Newspaper wars. We have a reporter here today, so we can talk about newspaper wars involving Snoop Dogg. We did a story the other day. Full disclosure, we covered a Snoop Dogg story the other day that I'm going to bring up at the end. That I'm going to bring up at the end of this, as to point out the absurdity of everything that's gone on with this. And I'm bummed because the article the third one I pulled up doesn't seem to be here. But this one says Snoop Dogg smokes weed right before star-studded Super Bowl halftime show. It says before taking the stage for Sunday's epic Super Bowl 2022 halftime show, Snoop Dogg had something of a pregame warm-up. In a video currently making the rounds on social media, Snoop is seen smoking what certainly looks like weed in the moments leading up to the star-studded performance, which has also featured Dr. Dre, Mary J. Blige, Kendrick Lamar, Eminem, and surprise guest 50 Cent. The performance has been lauded by fans online, with some of the biggest stars inside the stadium totally losing it on Sunday night, including LeBron James. Bengals kicker Evan McPherson, who had been Cincinnati's hero throughout the team's playoff run, stayed on the field to watch the show, along with long snapper Clark Harris. Maybe that's why they lost, because they didn't stay. They should have gone to the locker room for a bit.
So.
Per the NFL Network, Harris even relayed his halftime plans to the postmarks. Okay, so they just go down here. I just thought this is funny that this is news, considering what we had talked about that one time. Like, he literally had the Martha Stewart thing with him in the big lighter.
Like smoking weed is part of his persona.
It's literally who he is.
Yeah, and he didn't get that from nothing. Like, he didn't fake it so he could be like that weird stoner rapper.
No, it's his thing. In fact, I bet you if you looked up his name, 90% of the articles are related. Okay, not 90%.
Doesn't he have like a strain of marijuana named after him or something? I was gonna say, is recreational marijuana legal in California?
That is a good.
I think it is. So like, it would be like Snoop Dogg smokes cigarette before, like, no one can. Like,
you can basically pick up weed anywhere, but you have to be age of 21.
Well, he's definitely 21.
He's at least 21 from what I can see.
Yeah. So I don't know why they're making a big deal.
But this is the funny part. It says New York Post dragged for narking on Snoop Dogg's weed smoking. Do you ever plan to get into like beef with other news outlets? Is that going to be a thing?
No, that's dumb.
No,
I think that. Well, first off, why would you plan to have like beef with someone? That doesn't really make sense. Or at least it's like, I'm not a TMZ tabloid.
Yes.
The other part is like, I think that if they want to report on it, they can, and if I choose not to report on it, like, cool.
Exactly.
But I don't really like news that's like, this newspaper said this thing, and so we said this thing. Like, unless it's actually worth commenting on, it just like becomes like inner industry gossip.
Is the New York Post considered a tabloid?
No.
Isn't it like the oldest newspaper in the country or something like that?
Yeah.
I don't know. It might be.
Here, I'll search it up.
Okay, so it says, New York Post dragged for narking on Snoop Dogg's weed smoking, and it says the tabloid publication, that feels like shade. Calling it a tabloid, tried to shame the rapper for smoking weed prior to his Super Bowl halftime performance. It backfired spectacularly. I saw nothing about shame here. Did you see anything that said that looked like shame?
I think the fact that they're pointing it out, which Miracle said too, like, why are they even writing this story? And I think part of it is like, recreational marijuana isn't legal in all states, and the football in the Super Bowl is a national broadcast.
Yes.
So in some ways it reflects like how California is very different from the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Or at least the rest of the US. So maybe that's why it's worth publishing, to point out like that if this had been in Nebraska, where maybe marijuana is not legal, it would have had a different implication. They don't make that point in the article from what I can tell. But it can't technically be narking, right? Because if it's legal there, then he's not doing anything wrong. So,
and plus, that's his whole brand.
And this is from the Daily Beast. So it says the New York Post is once again catching flack for an inflammatory, completely unnecessary article. This time they reported that Snoop Dogg smoked weed before the Super Bowl halftime show, which is A, legal in the state of California, and B, pretty much Snoop Dogg's whole thing. Not exactly breaking news or worthy of coverage. Next, they'll report that spectators were drinking beer and eating hot dogs. Is this article any more necessary than that one?
More interesting if either one of them commented on the mask mandates, which we did cover on Timcast.
Yes, but of course that would be too. Yeah, exactly. Before taking the stage Sunday's epic football, so they just talk about what Snoop Dogg did here. He says that's it. That's the whole thing. They just basically mentioned the previous article. They're just paraphrasing.
They're summarizing.
They're summarizing. It says
they're like, maybe it's a slow news moment, and they're like, we have to find something, but we don't want to be against marijuana, so let's be against against another media outlet.
Yes, so that's it. That's the whole thing. There are a couple of short paragraphs summing up the show and the game, but no further mention of Snoop smoking because there's nothing else to say about it. And yet, that's what they chose to highlight in the headline, as if scolding him. I don't see a scold.
Like, the thing is, the two outlets are turning a story out of something that is like not
a story.
It's like just not that interesting.
They're doing the same thing.
Yeah,
they're literally doing the same thing.
I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if it came out later that like one of them, someone who works at the Daily Beast, is dating someone who works at the New York Post, and they're like, hey, we're going to cover this today. Do you want to help it? Because it's kind of a slow news day. And they're like, yeah, no problem. We'll start a feud. Like,
and yet that's what they chose to highlight as the headline, is of scolding him for sparking a doobie before. They should be fired just for saying doobie.
Young and hip. They know about what the kids like to call these things.
It's like saying the term, they love to say folks and y'all.
Yeah.
It says, as if scolding him for sparking a doobie before performing, it says, for the Post to choose this angle to cover the iconic halftime show, which featured a stacked lineup of hip-hop legends, reeks of racism.
Okay.
Comedian John Fugelsang retweeted the article, writing, New York Post, black male does something completely illegal in the state of California. Another user tweeted, I would have been surprised if the story was Snoop did not smoke weed before the halftime show. So would I. That would have been hilarious.
Yeah.
Good reporting, New York Times. So yes, this is very. And then they says, needless to say, the Rupert Murdoch-owned conservative tabloid will not be winning any Pulitzers for their hard-hitting reporting. So it literally is newspaper feuds. Now here's something that I would like to point out: why both of them are stupid. Because if you go back to this, you find this from just 3 days earlier: Snoop Dogg sexual assault suit, shameful and a self-enrichment scheme. I saw like maybe a couple of people covering this, and then it just disappeared.
Well, he was performing at the halftime show. What can we do?
Exactly. So it's like maybe they should both be ashamed of the fact that this that it's rules for thee and not for me for some people. That this would get endless coverage with some people, but when it's somebody that's about to perform at a very, very important event, it's suddenly no longer news. Which means it's exactly what they're saying over here: selective enforcement, selective covering of something based on what their political agenda is. So I really do think that both of them are failing on this regard.
Yeah.
I know.
Did you see any? Did you guys see this at all? What happened to Snoop Dogg and getting having a claim laid against him right
I've
before?
seen it, and we have not been covering it. Again, like when things go further with legal action, we'll tend to pick them up. There's like a reason to. I think it would have been either one of the outlets could have noted this allegation was there, but I also understand the instinct not to pick it up until you're able to review the court documents yourself.
It was just crazy to me, like the amount of to me, it's like we were going to cover it just because it's very we just talked about Snoop Dogg. All the stuff seemed very relevant, but it just didn't seem like it made much sense to do in the context of the story, because there's no name attached to it, nothing else. But it still feels very weird that none of them mentioned it at all in here. And it's like he's got a very important, very financially beneficial thing to perform this Sunday. Maybe we just push it. Maybe some lone very, very business savvy news editor said, maybe hold off.
Yeah.
And part of us could believe that it's because of the halftime show. Part of us might believe because they're journalistic integrity and they want to wait for more news. I have a hard time believing that with a lot of places, given the fact that they're literally having a newspaper flame war about Snoop Dogg smoking weed. So I'm not going to give either of them the benefit of the doubt. But I just thought that as a journalist, you might find that interesting that they just decided to not reference it at all, and it suddenly kind of falls down the memory hole. Because we tried to talk about it, and I was just like, I decided to scrap the segment.
I think part of it is you have to wait to see what legal action happens next, and then you have to decide what you're going to cover, right? Because you don't want to be in a position where you report on something with bad information.
Part of it's also I was just reading when we did the stuff about let's see if we can find anything here. When Chris Noth had the allegations against him about sexual assault, he was pulled off a TV show that he's currently on, and he had a deal with Peloton, immediately fired. So what is it why is it sometimes enforceable and sometimes not?
Right.
Because Snoop Dogg is a gem.
In the Me Too era, why is that? Why is it selective enforcement? That reeks of political agenda and lack of journalistic ethics to me.
Right.
So, I maybe, like I said, I'm not an expert. I'm not a journalist, like very important people here. Though actually, I do have a thing on timcast.com.
Yeah, you are published on our website.
So technically, I am a journalist. So
you're even more interesting because you're a video journalist.
yes, I want my blue check mark, and I want my opinion to be taken very seriously. I just thought it was silly that they're arguing over this, and then there's this going on, and neither of them decided to mention it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. It was a weird one to cover. Like we tried to cover it, and we just decided not to because it just didn't feel like it worked for us. Like it was we're more commentary and pop culture news, and that felt more like real.
Yeah, it's one of those things you have to wait to see how things develop. It's you know, you probably do this too. You always have your eye on stuff that's happening, even if it's not the thing you're writing about that day.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I love it how he says right now it's gold digger season.
That's what Snoop said in his response to the article. So
I don't know. And also to answer your question about New York Post, basically it says right here, oldest claim, the 1801 established newspaper describes itself as the oldest continuously published by daily U.S. newspaper. However, it was widely understood that this claim was false since New York Post halted publications during strikes of 1858 and 1958 and 1980. 80. I can't read. 78. Yeah. So basically, it's kind of false because they had 2 breaks.
Oh, so
But like arguably, if a different newspaper also had protests that lasted longer or took breaks for whatever reason, like you would have to go by the segments to which they have been continuously running.
that is weasel words on that fact check right there. Weasel words.
Well, it's also from Wikipedia, so I don't know if it's 100% true.
Fair enough. Yeah, well, Wikipedia, the source of all that is true knowledge on the internet. Thanks for watching this clip, guys. If you want to see full episodes or follow us on social media, links are in the description below. Bye.
Bye.